Hello, and welcome back to the semi-finals of the Victory Road to Frankfurt tour featuring GG Tour. I'm still Jamie Boyts, I'm still paired with Mava Rock here, and we're into the top four now. We are down to one final capture card, so we will try and bring the action as long as we can. If we do end up advancing with Francesco into the final, then we will be able to bring you that final, but if not, then we will unfortunately be ending here, so we will have to see how this semi-final is going to be going.
Yeah, so we're gonna, like you said, we're gonna be showing Francesco, who we saw earlier on the stream, and he's gonna be playing Kaito Arii from Japan. So a player who not only played through the 9 prior rounds yesterday, is currently playing at about 2:30 in the morning Japan time. So there is a lot. I have a lot of respect for both of these players, but after my long day yesterday of just casting Pokemon, I can't even imagine playing Pokemon till 2:30 in the morning, Jamie.
Yeah, it's an impressive mental fortitude there, and an impressive team as well. We haven't seen a Rotom Heat for a little while, so it does do very well against the popular Sun team that we've seen a lot, and it's paired up with the Yveltal as well, so it's not going to be facing down the Sun team here, but Yveltal is what you want to be facing down the Calyrex, so that could be a very good matchup going in there. You've got 3 Dark-type Pokemon coming out for Kaito here, so not going to be what Calyrex wants to face at all, but then you've got the Zacian to pair up with it, so that's what makes them a very nice pairing. Zacian can take care of the Dark types quite comfortably to be able to free up the opposing, pair up the partner Calyrex as well, so I'll have to see what both players are going to be going for, whether you can go for a bit more of a passive approach. You've got the Grimmsnarl that could be just setting those screens, or getting the speed control down, or you can just be going on the offensive straight away with something like a Dynamax Yveltal or a Dynamax Rotom, because that would be able to put on a lot of pressure onto both sides of the field.
And Francesco's team we've already seen before in stream, so we do have a little bit of background here, knowing how offensive he was playing with those that Reggie, Alecki, and Calyrex Shadow Rider lead from those games. But instead, he's going to be facing off against a Grimmsnarl and Incineroar by bringing his Blastoise and Calyrex Shadow Rider. So still a pretty offensive-looking lead for him here.
Yeah, definitely, and Incineroar's not in the best positions here. It is facing down the Calyrex at least, so it'll be able to get some potentially Dark-type attacks into that Calyrex, but the Blastoise would be able to get that G-Max Cannonade into the Incineroar before it attacks there, because Blastoise is usually faster than Incineroar's, and only a Light Screen would save it. So Light Screen would definitely be a good thing to go for the Grimmsnarl if it does have access to that, because it is facing down those 2 special attackers, and it would allow the Incineroar to be able to survive that G-Max Cannonade, and then be able to respond with either the Parting Shot to reduce the Blastoise's capabilities in that G-Max, or be able to do some Dark-type damage to that Calyrex if it is running it as well. Potentially the Grimmsnarl may even go for any of the speed control it's carrying. If it just goes for the Light Screen, that would be good as well. But Thunder Wave or Scary Face, as we've seen pick up on the Grimmsnarls, would be very useful into maybe the Blastoise to reduce the speed down, so that the Incineroar can Parting Shot before it attacks and then get out of there and let something else take the G-Max Cannonade as well. Could be quite nice. So there's a couple of different ways that Kaito can approach this, because it's led quite passively with the Incineroar and Grimmsnarl into the quite offensive Blastoise and Calyrex, but Grimmsnarl is not actually going to be doing anything here at all. It's not going to be setting up any screens, it's not going to be setting up any speed control, it's just going to be switching out into the Gastrodon, which is a very good switch in into a potential G-Max Cannonade.
That Gastrodon is happy to be sitting in front of that Blastoise and protecting his partner Incineroar right next to it. As that Blastoise goes for that Gigantamax, like you said, that G-Max Cannonade is going to be able to put on a lot of pressure if it's not facing down a Gastrodon, who would be happy to redirect that attack and get that boost in turn. So we'll see exactly this. Calyrex is actually going to go for an Energy Ball into the, oh my goodness, into the Gastrodon slot. And that is enough for a one-hit knockout and allow this Blastoise to go for something like a Cannonade and get its own Grim-Neigh boost to boot. That was absolutely a really well done read here. And this Cannonade is going to do a ton of damage onto this Incineroar. Enough also for a knockout. So Francesco played this first turn sublimely, perfectly maybe.
Yeah, Energy Ball is not a move you see very often on that Calyrex at all, but very crucial here. That allowed that G-Max Cannonade to go off. That was just incredibly safe, going for the Energy Ball if you're expecting the Incineroar to try and get that Parting Shot, because even if the Grimmsnarl stays in, you still get the Cannonade into the Incineroar. It would have to be Incineroar switching straight into the Gastrodon itself to be able to put a stop to that, but now you've got the Cannonade going, you get the passive chip going, the Gastrodon's gone, so you can just go for another Cannonade at this point, and Francesco is already in an absolutely commanding position. The Grimmsnarl, it could go for the speed control, get the Calyrex slower than the opposing Zacian before it goes for any of those Woolers or any of the Astral Barrages, but yeah, there we go. That's how game-ending a turn 1 can be.
That was insane. I was, my brain's like, I'm like, he's got one Dynamax option in his Grimmsnarl. Did he bring Gigantamax Grimmsnarl? Is he going to be able to use it if he gets his screens up? Is he going to have to rely on some, you know, Scary Face or Thunder Wave? If it's Thunder Wave, maybe you can go for some full paralysis hopes there. But an absolutely commanding lead by Francesco, and that shows exactly how important those turn ones can really be, right? Your turn one, I don't know if I've seen a turn one forfeit really since probably, I think, maybe 2020 at an MSS that I was at, but even then it was pretty rough. So I think, you know, now Kaito really has to reevaluate, you know, knowing of course that the energy balls on Calyrex completely changes your game plan, but it also means that your Gastrodon is no longer nearly as safe and you don't have any redirection on that team to get it away from it.
That would just very normally been an incredibly safe switch in, but the energy ball, a really nice tech on the Calyrex here to allow that Blastoise to basically do what it wanted to do in that game. So yeah, the game plan has to be completely reversed going in for Kaito here. Didn't bring the Yveltal to the match, which was quite interesting to see. Maybe thought the Gastron was even safer as a switch in because they led with two Pokemon that weren't restricted. So you've got to assume that both restricted are in the back, right? And then try to switch in to catch that Cannonade, but no, not at all. That is a very nice tech on the Calyrex to be able to deal with that and free up the Blastoise completely. So yeah, that's a very unique choice on the Calyrex. I think Leaf Storm is the one I've seen a lot more, but Energy Ball is a bit more consistent. As you can see, even though it's reduced power, it's 100% accurate as opposed to Leaf Storm and doesn't drop your special attacks. So very nice tech choice coming out for this Calyrex. And that's one of the benefit of the closed team sheets, right? Because going into this tournament, it is still closed team sheets, so you can catch your opponent off guard like that and just win a game on turn one.
You have to imagine that Francesco probably popped off incredibly hard, like in his chair at home. I know I would have if I was in that position. Gastrodon, though, and Yveltal are going to be the first Pokemon here for Kaito on his side, so a bit of a change, and then Calyrex, Blastoise. So Gastrodon is not exactly in his favorite position based on that first turn last game, but, you know, now we might be in a little bit of a different position for Kaito.
Yeah, and you've got the option to just go on the offensive with your own Yveltal at this point. So it's going to be able to take on the Blastoise and the Calyrex very well. Even if the Storm Drain wasn't available, it would still just be able to get some Snarls off potentially into the Blastoise, the Calyrex, just get the Dynamax going if you want to go for the Max Airstream or the Max Darkness into either Pokemon. Both would be very effective here. And if Gastrodon just wants to keep itself safe, it can just go for a Protect and the Yveltal just gets to do what it wants this turn. So quite a nice adjustment for Kaito here. I think that this makes a lot of sense to still keep the Blastoise in check, but you still have the option to just go for the Protect on the Gastrodon. You may even just switch out the Gastrodon, fearing the Energy Ball, and switch something in, because of course they don't want to go for the Cannonade in the face of the Gastrodon, so that could keep it quite safe as well. But the Gastrodon is definitely safe this turn because Calyrex is switching it into that instant.
Yeah, and Incineroar is not going to be able to put on some sort of pressure in that Calyrex like that Energy Ball would. However, this Blastoise possibly, we know it typically runs Blizzard, right? Most Blastoise tend to keep an Ice-type move just for that coverage, but I don't think we'll be seeing it here. The Yveltal is going to be going for that Dynamax first, I believe, from Kaito. Going to be able to put on a lot of pressure, get an Airstream up if needed, get those max. Actually, oh my goodness, no, it's the Gastrodon. Wow. I saw the Beast Ball and I was like, maybe I misread the Gastrodon and the Beast Ball, but no. And a giant slug on the field, completely, you know, one of the more interesting changes from Kaito. I'm not able to use his Dynamax last turn here, but instead we're going to see a taunt from the Yveltal into the Blastoise, and Blastoise is no longer going to be able to use Protect, I believe, while a Max Quake from this Gastrodon into the Incineroar slot. Oh my god, does almost a full one-hit knockout there. Yeah,
that's a great play for Kaito. What an adjustment. I think that was a yawn. Like, I feel like I recognize yawn.
I said protection. Yeah, I thought I read protection. I was like, I can't be right. Yeah.
Yeah, my Italian isn't great, but I feel like I recognize the word for yawn in Italian. So
thank you, sir.
Yeah, that would have been very effective into the Gastrodon and waste the turn of Dynamax in the future, because Taunt is not a common move that we've seen on the Yveltal at all. So we're just getting all these moves that we don't expect to see on these restricted Pokemon. The Energy Ball for Calyrex, the Taunt for the Yveltal, both coming into play on that turn one. Maybe not as game-ending as the Energy Ball was, but puts Kaito in a great position. The Gastrodon is going to be boosting up the special defense of both Pokemon, so it can take on the Blastoise and the Calyrex a lot better. And with that switch out of the Calyrex, you get to fake out the Yveltal short with the Incineroar, but you've got no offensive pressure onto this Gastrodon.
Yeah, and it looks like here, it actually looks like Ice Shard, I believe, from that Blastoise.
Oh, it's a Blizzard, it would have hit both.
Blizzard, yeah. going to be able to go for lowering that speed there, I believe, as well. Another Max Quake from this Gastrodon into the Incineroar is going to be enough to pick up that knockout. No more fake outs, no more intimidates possibly coming onto any of the Pokemon in the back for Kaito, which if it's that Zacian is going to be a really important change for Kaito to be able to move forward and position himself better towards this end game here.
Yeah, you would assume it's the Zacian because it would be so effective into the opposing Yveltal, but now with all the special defense boosts on the Gastrodon as well, it will be able to take the energy ball pretty comfortably from the Calyrex as well. That might be why the Zacian is switching in for Francesco's side of the field, so you can put on the offensive pressure on the physical side rather than just the special side, because the Max Quakes are going to be able to allow that Gastrodon to be very comfortable at this point. And the Blastoise is not really doing too much for Francesco at this point. It can't go for the Yawns because it's being taunted. The Blizzards, you can see, is just doing pretty much no damage, and it's very risky going for the Blizzards in the first place. You might be able to fish for a freeze here and there, but yeah, the Blastoise is not really doing too much here. And if you try and switch out to reset the taunt or get the potential the fake out on the Blast, or the fake out was for the Incineroar, it's just the Yawn instead. So the Blastoise would still need to switch out to be able to go for the Yawn instead. But Zacian, it can still do some very good damage to the opposing Yveltal or the Gastrodon if it just wants to go on the offensive here. But yeah, it's a bit awkward if you want to leave the Blastoise in. It could just switch out into Calyrex and take a lot of damage, but otherwise, yeah, it's not going to be doing too much for this turn.
Said Ice Shard, it is Icy Wind because it lowered the speed on both of them, so that was completely my mistake. But a substitute here from the Zacian is going to protect it from possibly something strong coming this turn, like an Oblivion Wing. However, Oblivion Wing targets the Blastoise, does over 50% of its HP to the Yveltal with a critical hit to boot, which it loves to get. Even though it had most of its HP in there, it loves getting back up to full here. So now another Icy Wind, going to slow down both of these Pokemon once again, doing the bare minimum of damage that this Blastoise can do because it can't put either of these Pokemon to sleep. And as soon as this Gastrodon wraps up its Dynamax, it may want to go for some Yawns of its own, but instead goes for another Max Quake, also into the Blastoise slot here, and that is a full knockout, so a really nice double target from Kaito. However, this Zacian is still set up behind a substitute, which is a tough position to kind of navigate around.
Yeah, it's quite a nice substitute there. You lose the Blastoise, which wasn't doing too much. Yeah, the Icy Winds being indicated by the drops as well. So yeah, the Calyrex is able to switch in and not really going to be able to put on too much pressure here at all. Is the only Pokemon that could be going for the Dynamax left on Francesco's side of the field. But with a +3 special defense on the Yveltal and the Gastrodon, even the Overgrowth would still be probably still able to be survived by the Gastrodon, because +3 special defense is going to be very significant. Maybe the Energy Ball or the Max Overgrowth would be able to take care of the Gastrodon. A double up definitely would be able to, but then if you're ignoring the Yveltal, then you are open to the potential of the Dark type moves just being able to do so much damage to the Calyrex. So still a very nice position for Kaito. At least you've got the substitute on the Zacian. The Zacian didn't have the substitute. The Gastrodon would be able to put on a lot more offensive pressure onto that Zacian, maybe be able to pick up the knockout depending on how it's trained as well. We haven't even seen the last two Pokemon for Kaito at this point as well, so they could be very good against the opposing restricted Pokemon. So you do need to prioritize here, and whether you think the Overgrowth is going to be able to KO the Gastrodon, because you kind of got to go for that at this point to be able to take care of the Gastrodon. Because you've got substitute on the Zacian, you've got to assume that there's not a play rough on there, because if you've got substitute, you have to drop something. It's either play rough or the fighting type attack, and usually it's the play rough instead. So probably has to be a Max Overgrowth coming out from this Calyrex. We are going to see it Dynamax, so we'll have to see how much it's able to do in the face of that +3 special defense Gastrodon.
Yeah, and you see a Pokemon like Calyrex almost reminds me back of Xerneas in 2016 and 2019 of how it loved to go for those boosted double target moves, but it is much better right now in a position of being Dynamax just to preserve more of its HP as Yveltal goes for a Protect. Not going to matter though, as it targets the Gastrodon, does almost 50% even with that those 3 special defense boosts thanks to its Max Quakes here, and that is still going to be pretty important as well, just kind of getting as much tip damage as you can onto this Gastrodon. However, I believe that Sacred Sword possibly went into the Yveltal, but did not matter because of that Protect. However, an Earth Power here from the Gastrodon breaks the substitute for Zacian.
Yeah, that's going to be a little bit best for Kaito now. Even though they're going to probably lose both Pokemon at this point, you've got to be in range of the Max Overgrowth, even with the +3 special defense at this point. And with the Max Phantasm drop, the Yveltal is going to be KO'd by the Behemoth Blade from the Zacian at this point. So probably going to be able to pick up a double KO here. You could protect the Gastrodon to be able to keep that safe for a turn and waste another turn of Dynamax from the Calyrex. But Yveltal is pretty much done at this point if it doesn't switch out, and it is going to be switching out here. And that one I do recognize. That one is Incineroar. I do know the Japanese for that one by now.
I'm surprised that you do, Jamie, as you literally never use it.
I've faced enough to know.
The Intimidate, though, from that Incineroar is going to be able to put a nice drop onto that Zacian on the opponent's side. A Protect from the Gastrodon here as well, avoiding some more damage from this Max Overgrowth that is going to be targeting right into it. And thanks to that Protect and those special defense boosts, it takes very little damage, whereas that was a one-hit knockout as an Energy Ball on turn 1 of Game 1. But it does set this terrain to be that grassy terrain, which may help the Zacian gain back a little bit of HP that it's lost throughout the turns. And it goes for another substitute here, so it's going to be able to possibly regain a little bit more HP from this grassy terrain with that substitute, and maybe set it up to make another one in the future.
And it keeps it safe from the fake out from the Incineroar as well. It did get the Intimidate down before that substitute, but at least it can't be faked out, so it can just go on the offensive at this point. And the Gastrodon is definitely going to be in range of any attack that the Calyrex would want to go for if it goes for another Max Overgrowth. You could just be switching into your Veltal to take that quite comfortably. You'd have to go in the offensive with the Zacian to be able to take care of that Veltal, because that is still sitting at a very comfortable amount of HP, and the Calyrex can't really touch it at all. So you do need to rely on the Zacian to be able to break the Veltal. But with the one more turn of Dynamax, you get to go for another Max Phantasm potentially if you want to drop the defenses of the Incineroar. You get to go for the Overgrowth to try and KO the Gastrodon, but that won't happen if it is going to be switching out here to be able to take that attack a lot more comfortably with that Veltal switch in.
Yeah, the Yveltal is going to be able to take that Max Overgrowth far better, possibly, than that Gastrodon would. However, it is going to be the Max Phantasm into that Incineroar. Like you said, getting that defense drop, which is absolutely huge and crucial for the Zacian to be able to do as much damage as it possibly could, especially if it can go for something like another Behemoth Blade into what that Yveltal slot was, as it, comes out from behind its substitute. Instead, goes for that Sacred Sword into the Incineroar slot. Is not enough to pick up the knockout, though, even with the drop, thanks to the Max Phantasm and the super effective move here. Instead, a Parting Shot going into that substitute. Substitutes do not get to deal with, or still have to deal with those those sound-based moves. So that Parting Shot is able to break through that substitute, drop the attack on that Zacian, and allow for Kaito to switch out and bring back in his Zacian of his own.
And you can see the very slight anti-synergy that you have with the Calyrex and the Zacian there. Sacred Sword is used over close combat a lot because it is able to bypass those boosts, but it also ignores the defense drops as well, so not going to be able to make use of the Max Phantasm coming out from the Calyrex, and that is why the Incineroar was able to survive. So yeah, the Incineroar being trained very defensively, able to take that on and be able to get that Parting Shot, which means that the Yveltal is freed up quite a lot because the Astral Barrage is going to do not so much damage. Might allow the Yveltal to be able to survive the Behemoth Blade as well, because we've seen there's no play rough on the Zacian at this point. Should probably be able to survive the Behemoth Blade, especially with the Intimidate and the Parting Shot. So that allows Yveltal to be the Calyrex counter it is supposed to be. And you've also got your own Zacian at this point to be able to take on the opposing Zacian. It should be able to win that one because the Zacian is now -1 on Francesco's side of the field. It does still have the substitute at least. You do need to break that, and we'll have to see the speed interactions between both the Zacians. I don't think we've seen that at this point. The Calyrex will be able to get some nice chip damage with the Astral Barrage, and that might be able to put the Zacian in range of another Behemoth Blade after this next one. It shouldn't be able to pick up the knockout after the drops though.
Yeah, absolutely, and it is not enough to even do half to either of these two Pokemon here. Zacian is going to go for a Behemoth Blade, like you said, able to at least get a big chunk of damage off onto this Yveltal here, and that should be enough to pick out. Oh, it is not enough to pick up the knockout here. It is so close, but this Yveltal is going to be able to hang on for another turn, as a Behemoth Blade from Kaito Zacian is going to be able to do as much damage as the prior one did onto this Calyrex. This Calyrex here shows that it's holding the Focus Sash. Finally, that is probably something that Kaito is really looking to fish for, and he didn't get to find that out in that last match. And a Snarl is going to finish off that Calyrex and go through that substitute and do another little extra bit of chip damage there to that Zacian on Francesco's side.
I'm actually impressed by the Snarl damage on the Zacian, given that it's a resisted hit. It's not going to be able to do any damage to the substitute, but it doesn't particularly need to at this point, because the Zacian it's not going to be doing as much damage. We saw the Yveltal able to survive that Behemoth Blade. With the -1 that it's got at this point, it's probably not going to be able to pick up the knockout on the Zacian either, so the Behemoth Blade from the opposing Zacian will be able to most likely be fired off, and it's just going to be keeping itself safe here. Maybe you're going for another Snarl to chip the Zacian down even further. You could go for an Oblivion Wing to try and break the substitute. You need a couple of them at least to be able to break through that, and that does seem to what the Yveltal is going for here.
Yeah, the Behemoth Blade from the Zacian on Francesco's side targeted right into the Protect on the Zacian on Kaito's side, but the Oblivion Wing, not very effective, was not able to break the substitute there, I believe. Actually, you know what? Yeah, it was not able to break the substitute there on that Zacian. So it's going to need at least one more hit to get rid of that substitute, and I think Zacian is going to need a little bit of help from its partner.
And it allows the Zacian on Kaito's side of the field a little bit more grassy terrain recovery, just as extra insurance to be able to survive the Behemoth Blade. So it should be pretty comfortable for Kaito at this point, especially with all 4 Pokemon. You'll be able to break the substitute most likely with another Oblivion Wing, and then even if you are able to maybe get a critical hit onto the opposing Zacian and then pay out that way, the Oblivion Wing should break the substitute. Incineroar can then come in, get the Intimidate on the Zacian with the substitute broken, and get some fake out pressure as well. So then that would just allow the Incineroar and the Gastrodon waiting in the back to be able to win as well. So yeah, it's looking very comfortable for Kaito here. Francesco recognizes that, and then we are now going into a game 3.
I mean, talk about really absolute position change between both of these players, right? Francesco had such a dominant turn 1 in game 1, and Kaito was able to slow it down in game 2 and really break down what Francesco's original strategy was, which was absolutely a great best of 1 strategy to catch your opponent on by surprise. But that's why VGC is a best of 3 format. You know, you're able to gain this information. Now you know too that this Calyrex, not only does it have Energy Ball, it's also Focus Sash. So you're going to need at least 2 hits. But Snarl from an Yveltal is pretty important, I think, to maybe deal with that Focus Sash if you're able to put yourself in the right position.
Yeah, it's breaking a Focus Sash and getting the drop on the Calyrex would be really nice. The drop should allow the Gastrodon to potentially take on the grass-type moves a bit better. Because we did see with the Pokemon that were brought for Francesco's side of the field, Rillaboom did not come to that match, so it kind of had to be the Calyrex as the Gastrodon answer. And very brave of it to just go for the Dynamax in the face of the Energy Ball. That would have still probably done over half damage, because we saw it knock out the Gastrodon in 1. It would have done over half damage to the Dynamax on the Gastrodon. So if you're on Francesco's side of the field, the Gastrodon was a little bit more of an issue now that you've revealed the Energy Ball and Kaito gets to play around that. Do you consider bringing the Rillaboom on your side of the field? Because the Blastoise was not very effective in that match. It was able to get the Cannonade in the first game, but then it got taunted, so it couldn't go for any Yawns in the second game. The Icy Winds weren't doing too much because the Gastrodon was already too slow enough. It didn't matter, and the Yveltal just switched out. So do you consider maybe switching it up and going for Rillaboom over the Blastoise at this point? Because you've got to be careful of the Storm Drains and your tech to be able to deal with it as being revealed at this point. You do need to be able to deal with the Gastrodon still, and if you bring the same 4 Pokemon, then you are relying on your Calyrex pretty heavily to deal with the Gastrodon, especially because you don't have Play Rough on the Zacian either, so that won't be able to do as much damage as it normally could do if you had access to that move to the Gastrodon. So we'll have to see if that is going to be a potential adjustment, or if an adjustment is going to be made for Francesco's side of the field, because into the opposing Gastrodon and Yveltal, and if the same thing happens, you could just Dynamax your Calyrex turn 1 and just get a max overgrowth, and that should still be able to KO the Gastrodon. So it could be very dependent once again going into this second game. Whether the Gastrodon is going to be led into an opposing Blastoise again, we'll have to see. And it is going to be, I still don't know the Japanese there, so it's still going to be the Gastrodon, but paired up with the Grimmsnarl this time.
Amy, why don't you read Japanese? Come on. It's really disappointing, but like you said, the Gastrodon and the Grimmsnarl, but Calyrex and Regieleki, which is the same lead we saw Francesco lead earlier on in this tournament. And we saw how much offensive pressure that Dynamax Regieleki was able to put on. However, it does not love looking at a Gastrodon on the opposite side of the field, just as much as Gastrodon loved looking at that Blastoise earlier.
Yeah, it's an interesting go with the Regieleki as the answer here. It does very well into the opposing Yveltal, but that hasn't been led, so the Regieleki isn't in the greatest of positions here. It can get Max Lightning into the Grimmsnarl for sure and get some very good damage down and potentially put it in range of an Astral Barrage even if it sets up a screen, but then you run the risk of just going into that Dynamax Gastrodon once again and just going for the Max Quakes to be able to survive a lot easier, so still a little bit awkward. The Gastrodon does have to be wary of the Energy Ball. We'll have to see the mind game between whether the Gastrodon goes in the offensive or if it protects or switches out in the face of that potential Energy Ball. And maybe the Energy Ball pressure is enough to allow this Regieleki to just go on the offensive, because if you do click Energy Ball into the Gastrodon slot, you probably keep the Regieleki safe this turn. Only a Dynamax on the Gastrodon would keep it safe, and then you are using up a turn of the Dynamax that could be taking a lot of damage from the Energy Ball, because you are committing to this Dynamax with the Regieleki. Going to be doing some massive damage with the Max Lightning into the Grimmsnarl if it goes for that, because it can't really touch the Gastrodon otherwise. We'll have to see if a Dynamax is responded by it with Kaito.
Yeah, and there is a Dynamax here, and that Beast Ball, like we saw earlier, Jamie, does show that it's that Gastrodon on his side. Not going to want to take something like an Energy Ball, knowing how much of a one-hit knockout that was last time. But now, like you said, able to put out something like a Max Quake. So unless you see something maybe like a Max Guard from this Regieleki, which it may not even hold at this point, because you know that the Focus Sash is on this Calyrex, and there is going to be here a light screen from this Grimmsnarl, stopping any special attacks from either of these Pokemon, but the Max Lightning from the Regieleki into the Grimmsnarl does about 3/4 damage there. So I believe, like you said earlier when we saw this, that this Regieleki was physical, if I'm not mistaken, paired up with that Calyrex here, so it was able to do a really nice chunk of damage. But the Energy Ball into the Gastrodon does just about 50% to its Dynamax form there, and it also does get the drop there too. So now the Max Quake from the Gastrodon able to go into this Regieleki unprotected does just over 50%, so neither of those Pokemon can take that again. However, Calyrex is still faster than the Gastrodon.
That is a very important special defense drop with that Energy Ball. It's not a very likely thing to happen. You don't see it too often, but that is going to be very crucial because it did 50% to the Gastrodon, and then it effectively cancelled out the Quake. If the Quake special defense boost was still on the Gastrodon, it would have been able to survive another one of those Energy Balls for sure. Maybe if a double up of an Airstream into an Energy Ball would have picked up the knockout on the Gastrodon, but at this point you just get to attack the Grimmsnarl with your Regieleki and go for the Energy Ball once again into the opposing Gastrodon. It could be very close if that is going to be able to pick up the knockout, because it's within range of it being a potential roll on whether it was going to knock out the Gastrodon. If it gets the same roll, it would knock it out, but if it gets a lower one, it might not. So do you risk that being a potential roll and you just got a high one? Do you still double up with the Airstream into the Gastrodon and then get the Energy Ball off? That's probably not what you want to do for your Francesco side of the field. You do want to be getting the damage onto the Grimmsnarl because it is getting both of its screens here.
Yeah, both of its screens going with that Reflect this turn as its partner Pokemon Gastrodon goes for a Max Guard here. So this Max Airstream going into that Grimmsnarl is enough to pick up this knockout here, but that means that whatever this Calyrex does, if it was some sort of physical attacking move, it's not going to be able to do anything into this Gastrodon, who is now gone for that Max Guard here. So Grimmsnarl is now off the field, but I think it did exactly what it wanted to do with both of those screens. It wasn't able to get any sort of speed drop onto that Calyrex like it may have wanted for its partner Pokemon Gastrodon, though.
Yeah, it's interesting Max Guard there for the Gastrodon. Maybe you do need to risk the roll on the Energy Ball because it's probably going to be knocked out if you bring in either Pokemon. That you're not going to be able to fake out the Calyrex, so it's just going to be able to launch off the Energy Ball once again. And you're going to be bringing in the Zacian here that's still going to be underspeeding. You still get to go for the Energy Ball into the opposing Gastrodon. You get to go for Max Lightning as well into the Zacian, so it's still quite an awkward position for Kaito. It might have been better to sacrifice the Gastrodon there so that you can get both the Zacian and whatever is waiting in the back in for free. But Gastrodon is most likely going to be in range of another Energy Ball here. You could go for the double up into the opposing Zacian, expecting the Zacian to just go on the offensive because the Gastrodon's surely going to be targeted by the Energy Ball. But yeah, the Gastrodon is going to be switching out here if it's Dynamax. Not going to make use of its last one. And Incineroar or Evelpool would be a very nice switch in. It is going to be that Incineroar, so going to be a very nice switch in for the Energy Ball.
Yeah, absolutely. They're going to take an energy ball far more comfortably than that Gastrodon would have, and you don't often see a lot of people switching out their Dynamax, but it is definitely important to see it here. Zacian, though, on Kaito's side, goes for that Protect this turn. Regieleki goes for another Max Lightning into that protected Zacian slot here. Does very little damage through that Protect with that Light Screen and Reflect as well going on. Calyrex, another Energy Ball, like you said, into this Incineroar, who is happy to come in here and take that, get an Intimidate down, especially to also onto that Zacian, and maybe go for something like a Parting Shot later.
Yeah, this is a much better position for Kaito at this point because all the Dynamax has been used up. You do get to get fake out pressure into that opposing Regieleki, and then you can just follow up with Behemoth Blade into the opposing Calyrex as well. So this is definitely a slightly better position than it was before. Preserving the Gastrodon makes sense because if you face down the Regieleki in the end game with the Gastrodon, you still can just win that one because it can't touch your Gastrodon. A bounce would be able to get there, but you can always just protect on the second bounce turn. So quite nice preserving that. And like you said, so you don't often switch out your Dynamax, but it definitely makes sense here because it would have just most likely gone down to the Energy Ball from the Calyrex. It would have probably been able to stay on the field if it didn't get that special defense drop, but that was quite critical because it allowed that Energy Ball to be the KO, so it did have to switch out.
Yeah, Incineroar here will be switching in, getting an all-important Intimidate, all-important fake-out pressure on that next turn as well. Ability to possibly go for something like a Parting Shot. Incineroar really loves these Zacian formats because it can do so much, while Calyrex goes for a Protect here, not trying to take anything from either of the Pokemon on Kaito's side. Sacred Sword, though, into the Incineroar from Kaito onto Francesco is a ton of damage. Shows that this Incineroar is holding a berry, however, and that is going to be that Citrus Berry, and that brings it up a good amount back over to 50%, so it can take another Sacred Sword. Parting Shot from one Incineroar on Kaito's side into the other on Francesco's is going to be able to allow that Incineroar to swap back, maybe bring that Gastrodon back out if you really need to here. Not exactly wanting to sit in front of a Calyrex, but, you know, you've got options.
But that was definitely a way back into the match for Kaito there. Now you've got the Incineroar not quite in range of another Sacred Sword, but it's not going to be doing as much damage with something like a Flare Blitz into the opposing Zacian. So that was definitely the way back into the match for Kaito at this point. But like you said, the Gastron switching into the face of that Calyrex, probably still not the most ideal thing. You could switch the Gastron straight back out into the opposing Incineroar as well, and that would get another Intimidate onto the Incineroar and keep your Zacian a bit more safe from the Flare Blitzes that come out from the Incineroar. But at the same time, you could just go on the offensive with Astral Barrage instead of Energy Ball, because that would still do very good damage to the Gastron. Probably not pick up the knockout, but would still do very good damage to the opposing Zacian as well, and would be able to catch the Incineroar on the switch in, so that you can still do some very good damage to that opposing Zacian, because the Gastron here, it is scared of the Energy Ball. It is going to be switching straight back out into the Incineroar.
Yeah, Incineroar, like you said, comes back in, gets another Intimidate onto this Incineroar on Francesco's side, so no Flare Blitz there. The Calyrex, though, on Francesco's side, still hasn't activated that Focus Sash yet, but the Protect from the Calyrex, or sorry, the Zacian on Kaito's side means it's not going to be taking any damage from this Astral Barrage. That will just be hitting this Incineroar on Kaito's side. Still not going to do a whole lot of damage here, as Incineroar can handle that pretty well, and it's such a, bulky Pokemon at this point, so, I think Francesco, he's going to go for that Flare Blitz, I believe, into that, or no, Fake Out into the Zacian there, Flare Blitz into the Zacian, but absolutely no dice.
I think I'm learning Italian here. I'm pretty sure that was Passing Shot.
Okay, that was my third guess.
I feel like I'm learning all the languages here, but it's all to do with Incineroar, which is annoying because I know all the languages of Incineroar, but so Incineroar's not getting the Passing Shot into the opposing Zacian, but I could just still switch out into either Pokemon in the back. It doesn't have to go for Passing Shot. It can preserve the Intimidate just by switching out instead. Because Fake Out pressure is back on the field, you could go for the Fake Out into the opposing Incineroar to stop any of the Passing Shots from going off her. But Zacian isn't going on the offensive here. It's just going to switch out into the Gastrodon instead.
Yeah, Gastrodon would love to take a Flare Blitz possibly, but instead that Incineroar from Francesco is going to switch out into the Regieleki. Again, doesn't love looking down the face of a Gastrodon here, like we saw in turn 1, but Calyrex now going for its own Protect, matching what the Restricted on Kaito's side had done last time. And here is another Parting Shot. Manito, right? Okay, now I've got it. So it is that Parting Shot onto the Regieleki, lowering its stacks there, lowering its attack and special attack stats there, and allowing him once again to switch out, bring that Zacian possibly back in, get that Intrepid Sword boost, and then maybe again hard switch your Gastrodon out if needed.
Yeah, both players are playing very cautiously here. They're protecting their restricted Pokemon. They're getting the Passing Shots into the Incineroar. At any point, if they just go on the offensive and get it correct, that'll probably swing the game in their favor. But now we're still just playing the same game. We're just switching around, protecting. The Calyrex is just protected here, but there's nothing like the Incineroar going for the Fake Out there here. Would have to just switch in, just to be able to get the Intimidate down onto the physical Regieleki. Maybe a Wild Charge and an Astral Barrage would be able to pick up the knockout on the Zacian if it doesn't get intimidated, but then at the same time you just might want to intimidate the Zacian once again with your own Incineroar and keep the Regieleki safe as well, so you can get some good damage into the opposing Incineroar when it comes back in as well. Do you go for the Energy Ball into the Gastrodon as well? You've got to always be mindful of that. If the Energy Ball hits the Gastrodon, it's definitely going to be KO'd. Do you just go for the Astral Barrage and do some very nice chip damage to the Gastrodon, because 2 Astral Barrages should be able to pick up the knockout onto it. But then if you just stare down the Calyrex with your Gastrodon and just go on the offensive, you have the option to be hit by that Energy Ball. So it's just going to be, just the Will-O-Wisp here instead. And Gastrodon did just go on the offensive.
Yeah, and I do really like that Will-O-Wisp here, because that is at least something to put you in a little bit of a better position. However, you're still going to be taking a Behemoth Blade because there wasn't any sort of Protect or anything from that Zacian right into your Calyrex slot. Does a good chunk of damage still, and most importantly, breaking that Focus Sash as you see another Earth Power from this Gastrodon into the Calyrex. Not enough to get that knockout, however, and most importantly now this Zacian, thanks to that burn, wasn't able to do enough damage to have its partner Pokemon knock Calyrex out.
Very brave, the Gastrodon that's just got on the offensive. That was potential to go for the Energy Ball. But something to note as well, I'm pretty sure there's no leftovers on the Gastrodon. So that is the item of choice that we see a lot on the Gastrodon. But it would have been very nice here because it's been on the field for quite a few turns that would have been able to make use of that recovery. So that is something to make a note of there for the opposing Gastrodon. And now the Calyrex is in range of the Behemoth Blade, even burned from the Zacian and intimidated, it will be able to pick up the knockout. And Calyrex is the best way of breaking through the opposing Gastrodon. There is still the Zacian waiting in the back, and with half health and no leftovers, then Zacian would still be able to do some very good damage to the Gastrodon and probably be able to deal with it. But protecting the Calyrex makes a lot of sense here because you do want it as your Gastrodon answer, which doesn't seem like it's going to protect. At least the Zacian is instead.
Yeah, Zacian not wanting to face anything from this Incineroar. Gastrodon also matching that Protect here. If only Incineroar carried Protect instead, its parting shot into that Gastrodon will not have any effect. A little bit more burn damage onto this Zacian. You know, these burn turns really, you know, add up if you're going for these Protects and have to play defensively.
Yeah, and then that wastes the potential fake out from the Incineroar, but it also, we saw there one of the screens disappeared. I think that was the light screen, and there's one more turn.
That was the Reflect,
so,
actually.
But so,
oh, wait,
yeah,
no, wait, you're right. It was Reflect, one more turn away screen, so sorry.
So the screens are being stalled out at this point. So effectively, you stalled out your own screens, and you gave yourself an extra turn of burn when the fake out was not fired off by the Incineroar. So that was a potential to just go on the offensive and not take as much damage as you normally would have done. And you see there that the Zacian in the back for Francesco is still very healthy. The Gastrodon does seem very important for Kaito's side of the field, and it's still not going to be taking an energy ball. Francesco is still not comfortable enough committing to just clicking energy ball into that Gastrodon, especially because it is switching out into the Incineroar. So that does seem like it is the correct position there, because that is still the best way through that Gastrodon.
Yeah, absolutely. Incineroar is going to switch in a really nice ability to get that Intimidate and have more opportunity for a parting shot later, as we do kind of play the revolving door of Incineroar, not really just Pokemon here as well. Zacian, though, goes for that Behemoth Blade into that Regieleki slot. That should be a pretty... almost a knockout, not really, because of all of those drops from all of those Intimidates rotating in and out, and this parting shot from Francesco's Incineroar into the Incineroar on Kaito's side, also going to lower that attack stat there. So this is a much slower game of Pokemon. It is slowed down exponentially over these 3 games from the turn 1 of game 1.
Yeah, and like making up for the game 1, I guess, so that we can get more content for the stream, of course. Thank you very much, players. So yeah, like now the Zacian is hitting the field for Francesco's side of the field, so it is going to be able to hit the field before the Intimidate of the opposing Incineroar. That should be able to be in range of the Behemoth Blade for the opposing Zacian, thanks to all that burn and the extra chip. Maybe the Incineroar is going to be in range of the fighting type attack, the Sacred Sword that we've seen, because it is not Intimidate at this point, and it's taken some chip as well. A lot of Incineroars do EV to be able to survive that attack, but then if you've taken some chip, you're probably in range. If the Incineroar does just switch out straight out into the Gastrodon, that's still going to take a huge chunk of damage, maybe even pick up the knockout, because Zacian is so strong. So yeah, it is very nice position for Francesco. It was basically Francesco waiting to get that Zacian on the field so that it couldn't be intimidated. Now they've got that position, you do just get to fire off a pretty safe Sacred Sword into the opposing Incineroar, and if that Gastrodon switches in like it does, then it's going to take a lot of damage, and Calyrex doesn't have to be the answer anymore.
Yeah, that Volt Switch from the Regieleki going into the Zacian shows that Life Orb here finally, and a substitute from that Zacian as well. Gets this Zacian again into a slightly more safe position here as another Behemoth Blade from Kaito's Zacian into either of these Pokemon, into that Regieleki. Most importantly, he's going to finish that off here, so it's not going to be able to do some of that big damage like we've been able to see, especially now that that Reflect had just ended on the turn prior as well. So, excuse me, I said Volt Switch, that was Wild Charge, and I know you're going to call me on that in about half a second.
Now we've got a very nice substitute that I'm going to focus on instead, because now the Zacian hit the field and did not get intimidated, and now it can't be intimidated, so that is very nice. And now you're in a position where if you are faster on with your Zacian than the opposing one, you get to click Energy Ball into Gastrodon, you get to click Behemoth Blade into the Zacian, and there is nothing that Kaito can do at this point. Sure, you can protect, you can switch out into the opposing Incineroar, and then you're in exactly the same position as you are before because of that substitute, because you've got out, you can't be intimidated, you can't be faked out, Calyrex can't be faked out, so even if there is any more positioning with the Incineroar at this point, that won't help. You'll just slowly be chipped away at this point. So Francesco has moved themselves into quite a nice position now. Kaito was doing the best that they could, clawing back into this game, but it seems like Francesco is very much in the driving seat at this point. It seems like Kaito realizes that, and we are going to have a capture card in the final.
That is very lucky for us, very unfortunate for Kaito, who really brought himself back into both of those games there. But it does mean that we will be able to bring the finals to you, and hopefully that won't take us very long, Jamie, because we'll probably have to cut to a short break here so we can get both of those trainers to set up. We'll be back and we'll be able to bring you our finals match. We're not sure exactly yet who it's going to be between the two of them.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting match regardless, and we are very thankful that the capture card did make it through. So yeah, like you said, we will cut to a short break and we will be back with the final.